Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is Stop Sabotaging Your Sales with my friend Ann Holm. How's it going, Ann Holm?
Oh, it's going great. It's going great. I'm so happy to be here. It's been a while.
Yes, it has been a while. Ann has been on my podcast, I don't know, it feels 10 times, but each time people love it. But it's been at least a year. So thank you for coming back. Ann, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Okay. I'm Ann Holm, and my company is cleverly named annholm.net. And I am an executive and personal development coach. I work with both groups as well as individuals. And I'm calling you today from the Twin Cities of Minnesota.
Very nice. Ann has been my executive coach or whatever coach for, I'm thinking, 2010,
It's been a long time.
2011. It's been a long time, and it has been totally worth it. I say this all the time. You think you can see yourself. You think you can see yourself in the mirror, your actions, but you can't. And then when you talk to someone like Ann, who has a framework, it's not just war stories and, hey, you should do it this way. We'll talk more about your approach, but it has been so helpful, and it's just saved me so much hassle in my life and made me money. If you're looking for an executive coach, you want to get someone like Ann Holm. And by the way, I'll say it. I know I've said this on other podcasts. Ann is the one who twisted my arm into blogging, which is probably 2011, 2012.
Long time ago.
And she said, just call it the logistics of logistics or something. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that's a placeholder name. I'll come up with something better. And then I mentioned to my website guy, Matt Collins, and he goes, oh, I love that name. And I go, it's just a placeholder. He goes, buy it now. That's a perfect name. And every time somebody says, that's the best name, I go, yeah, my executive coach came up with it. So thank you. And then you were the one also who said just before COVID, Joe, you were consulting, you're advising, you're doing training and the podcast. Just focus on the podcast. And I was like, I don't know. I'll think about it. It was, again, the right decision. So thank you so much, Ann.
Oh, yeah. It's been fun to work with you. I think the best part is that you've introduced me to so many people in the logistics industry, and I've been able to work with them and help them. And you were the epicenter of all of that. So I do appreciate that.
We need help. We're a screwed up bunch over here, Ann.
It's funny because I was at dinner, I don't know, a couple months ago, and we were sitting with one of our friends, and he's in the logistics industry. And so I was throwing around the terms, and he said, how'd you learn about all of this? Most people don't know that much about logistics. And I said, I actually have had a lot of clients in the industry, and they have really taught me a lot about the breadth of it and the challenges in the industry. And it's been an interesting learn. And even when I'm driving on the road, oh, there's XPO. There they are.
Right. And you live up near C.H. Robinson.
Near C.H. Robinson, yes.
It's funny, and I don't think anyone takes it personally when I say, oh, we're a screwed up bunch. But what I always say is whenever I recommend somebody to, I say almost every Fortune 500 CEO now gets a coach, because you might have a personal problem or a business problem that you're trying to solve, but most of the people who are going to get coaching are already performing at a high level, and they're looking for a leg up. And that is what it has been for me. It's just because you think, and we're going to get into sabotaging your sales, but there's different type of saboteurs, and we all have certain things that it might be a strength. That's just a strength that went a little too far and became a little bit of a weakness.
Yeah. Yeah. You can get in your own way using your own strengths, which is sometimes hard to believe. But yeah, I think the individuals that I work with are individuals that are looking to become more successful at what they're doing. My background prior to that was working with brain injured people. And it was a bit of a shift to not work with people who had experienced an injury, but to work with people that were wanting to get better at something. But at the end of the day, there is some commonality, because you find out where they are right now and what those strengths are, whether my old clientele, which used to be brain injured people, to individuals who are successful business owners but want to do more or learn more, or emerging leaders who want to get better at something. You want to determine where are they right now and where are those flames that we can bellow to create a fire. So the other name of my company is Uncover Your Potential. I'm all about that.
Yep. And you started to touch on it, but tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you started Uncover Your Potential, or annholm.net, depending what you're calling it today.
Yes. Yes. So, I grew up in the Detroit area. I'm a Motown gal, and, my father, was in market research for the automobile industry, so I had a lot of exposure to that industry. I went to University of Michigan
Go Blue.
and go blue, dyed in the wool, maize and blue veins here. Honestly, I will make no bones about that. I went to Michigan and I focused on psychology, speech and hearing, and then my degree in speech pathology was my master's degree. And I did work in speech pathology for 25 years. And then after that period of time, I felt like I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I wanted to still work at helping people become the best versions of themselves or develop self awareness, because at the end of the day, it is about your self awareness that allows you to make sustainable changes. And I went into coaching. And then from that, I really started to lean hard into the logistics space because it was very interesting to get involved in that.
You got in it right as the industry was having at an inflection point where the whole industry's really grown up in the last 10 years or so.
Absolutely. And so it's been really neat to meet people in this industry and to help them get better at it. A lot of emerging leaders, even these teams. There's one company that I've worked with that has just grown exponentially. And so their leaders are individuals that were there when the company started, and now they have to build their skill set to get better at certain things in order for them to grow into their job that keeps increasing because the company is so successful. So it's been neat to help them through that journey.
Yep. And I tell people this, that why I picked you as an executive coach is you have a framework that is based in science. So you're a brain expert first, which is really helpful. And I know you use that in your coaching. There are different personality types, and I use Myers-Briggs and use the Saboteur framework. And I really wanted somebody who was starting with that foundation. There's lots of coaches out there who'll say, I ran a similar type of business as yours, and I can help you get to the next level. I'm all for it. There's different kinds of coaches who will say, I'm not an expert in your business, but I am an expert in how you think. I can help you understand where you're strong and where you're weak. And when I started working with you, God, I had some personal problems I was going through. And then I had some career problems I was going through. And I swear to God, I thought I was going out of my damn mind. And you get down on yourself. And I'd been successful and to that point, and I felt like I was just stuck. And it was really helpful to hear or to talk to someone who could go, yeah, you're not as crazy as you think. We'll get you back on track. It's been really helpful. And I can say a lot of my friends and listeners work with you, and I'll say the same thing. Highly recommend.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I really like the distinction that you made about coaching because you're absolutely right. You can get some good, and I would almost call it advice from somebody who's walked the walk in your particular industry. So these are great advisors who can say, when I was building the business, this is what we did, et cetera. So those people absolutely, I think, are invaluable to somebody wanting to take it to the next level. The other side, which is how an individual thinks, how they approach things, how they process information, how they judge it, how they organize themselves, that's a completely different thing. And that's where I've fallen, is helping people understand how they think, understand how they can maximize how they think in order to get to the
Yep.
next level.
Yep. And I know you are a master practitioner of the Myers-Briggs frameworks, which we virtually all took in high school and then in college and then maybe at a job. I'm an ENFP, and I know you are too. And I remember when you said, here are what ENFPs are good at, here's what they're not good at. It was it was a revelation because when then you could look up famous ENFPs. Now you Google it, you go, oh, okay, I see what all these people are good at. I see where those strengths lie. But also, every once in a while, you run across something, and it'll be Colin Powell's 10 leadership tips. And you look at it and you go, okay, yeah, okay, this is good, but I don't know. Doesn't it didn't fit me. And I'm using Colin Powell as an example. And it occurred to me while I've been working with you over all these years that okay, that's the what works for him, but maybe I can't copy Colin Powell. I don't have the same personality type as he does. I'm so much better if I can focus on my strengths and maybe follow a fellow ENFP because I have similar strengths. And it's the recognition that there's more than one way to get there. And you have to play to your own strengths and be aware of those weaknesses as you go.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love that example that you used about the 10 steps that Colin Powell takes to do whatever. He's very likely made up of a different sort of mindset, and so those things work for him. So it's really helpful to have some level of self-understanding and not beat yourself up for not being another individual, but look at where your strengths are, where your blind spots are, and for today's topic, which is actually how you get in your own way. 'Cause that's also a fairly predictable pattern as well.
So I want to take a quick time out to invite you to the Trimble Insight Conference, which will be held in Las Vegas on September 15th, 16th, and 17th. I will definitely be there, and you should too. Trimble Transportation is a leading provider of transportation management solutions, offering technology and services to help businesses optimize their fleet operations and improve efficiency. If you're looking for the transportation conference of the year, look no further than Trimble Insight 2024, featuring over 200 educational breakout sessions, networking opportunities, and engaging evening events. I recently interviewed Kelly Williams from Trimble, and I will put a link to that episode along with a link to the conference registration in the show notes. I will see you in Las Vegas. So, getting back to it, since I've been working with you, you've also worked with both my daughters. And it's funny because they'll go, oh, I'll hear them talking. He's this. And I was like, they know those Myers-Briggs classifications better than I do. But it has helped me because I know what my daughters are because you've helped me understand their personality types. And you tell your kids, no, you have to do it this way. And then at some point you realize that's not the way they are. I'm telling them how an ENFP would approach that, but they don't have that personality type.
Exactly, exactly, and I just wanna say that it becomes just a framework to start the conversation. We all, of course, have other factors that go into who we are, whether it's your family, your education, your other experiences, but it's a good starting point to start the self-discovery or to start to understand how you think, and it's an easy way, it's accessible to get you started.
Yep. So today's topic, Ann, is stop sabotaging your sales. So I know you have another framework you use besides the Myers-Briggs. You use, I forgot what it's called, but it's all about saboteurs. And there is what, 9 saboteurs, and we're only going to talk about 3 of them. We'll give the list of all 9, but we'll only go in deep dive on 3 of them and how those saboteurs are holding you back from your sales. And by the way, I am one of these, at least one of these. And I think every time I hear about a saboteur, I was like, oh, sometimes, yeah. But I know because you tested me years ago, so I know what my saboteurs are. And once one of my shortcomings, my saboteurs, you can start working on it. So talk about that framework first, the saboteur framework.
Okay. So the saboteur framework is basically this idea that you've developed a set of strategies starting when you were very young. So you develop these when you're looking at the world through a child's mind. So you're really young and you're looking at the world unfolding and you come up with these strategies. these are helpful for you when you're little, but when you grow up and the world is more complex, these actually get in your way. So you sabotage yourself. And a lot of these strategies that you come up with are based in your actual natural strengths. So you start off from the position of natural strength, but then you either overuse it or you only use that one strategy, and suddenly you're not getting the results that you got as a kid because the world isn't that simple. These are called saboteurs because you're sabotaging your own progress by letting these things get in your way.
And this is all based on research from is it a doctor, professor?
Yeah, yes, yeah, sure can mean, and the book is called Positive Intelligence, but it's a pretty well researched framework around what these things are and why they're there in the first place, and what their impact can be as far as being the best version of yourself. And in this case today, we're going to be talking about sales and how it impacts sales.
So I'm gonna list all these, and then we'll get into three of them in detail. So we're talking about, before we hit record, about the 9 saboteurs. So there's avoider, there's the restless, there's the hyperachiever, there's the victim, the pleaser, that's one of mine, hyper rational, the controller, the stickler, and the hypervigilant. And each one of these things has the potential to sabotage our sales. This is a weakness that you might have that is holding you back. And I can say right now, we'll get into avoider in a little more detail. I am an avoider, and it hurts me in my sales sometimes. And I have strategies that Ann has helped me with to stop avoiding stuff, because what I did in my mind is I would make it big. I was like, oh, I got to send that email. It's going to take a while. It's going to be, it could be, they could respond and it might be negative, and it takes you an hour to do something that should take you 2 minutes.
Yes, the avoider is the classic procrastinator. The person who will either make something so much bigger than it really is because they just leave it to fester, back burner and all of that, or downplay the significance of the thing that they need to do. I can do that later, or whatever. And what that actually is drawing from is this flexibility that you have inherent in your personality. Oh, well, I can do this here, I can do that, I can flex and all of that. What it becomes the avoider is when you are picking no lane and everything is huge. And so I better not do this.
And it occurred to me, you're right about flexibility. So being in my personality type, ENFP, we are flexible people. You're one of those also. And so I like to leave my options open. And I remember 2 people who worked for me came and said, "Hey, Joe, what about this and this we need?" And I left it a little open, a little too much ambiguity to the answer. And I remember one of them said, "Knew you were going to say that." Like basically leaving it wide open, because that was very comfortable for me, but very uncomfortable for my team. I was like, and then it just hit me. It was like, oh, that's what Ann's talking about.
It can be a highly annoying thing to be is the
I didn't want to make the call. I just wanted to leave it open until there was more information, maybe, or a good reason to pick a lane. Nope, we'll just stay in both lanes for now.
yes, and the lie you tell yourself is, why is everybody else so uptight about this?
But if you're in a sales position and you're an avoider, first off, you're avoiding sending up the follow-ups. You're procrastinating on little things that you shouldn't be procrastinating on. And then you want to keep this thing a little too wide open. Yeah, I'll call you in a week or two, or maybe a month, or you call me back, or whatever.
Yes,
and,
yes.
and they're like, and I don't know where my avoider ends and my pleaser begins, where it's like, oh, I don't want to hold you. I don't want to ask you to do anything. It's all about me making you happy.
Yes, yes. You don't want the unpleasantry of trying to nail something down, or maybe you'll feel trapped. So, one of the things I think we'll notice in our conversation here today is that the one behavior does it not need to necessarily equal the one saboteur. It can be a couple of them conspiring to stand in your way. So, you mentioned, well, this pleaser avoider get in my way? Yeah, it might get in the way of wanting to maybe, cut off a dead lead, a lead that doesn't really going anywhere, but you don't wanna be seen as a bad guy, so you still hang in there because it's so unpleasant to say, "Okay, you know what? I don't think you're actually interested in this product, and we'll leave it at that." It's hard for somebody with those combination of saboteurs to cut off a dead lead.
Yep. Yeah, we before we hit record, we were prepping for a minute, and I mentioned an individual that we both know that I found to be a problem to work with, and I didn't want to work with him. And I remember I just kept letting it linger, and it was like I just should cut off this relationship. It's not a good one, and that is very unusual for me not to have good relationships. So it was like I let it linger for months beyond when I should have just said, enough already. We don't need to be friends with the whole world. There's some that don't work.
And that's a bit even leaning even stronger into our next saboteur. But I wanted to just
Well,
finish up with this
yeah, let's
avoider.
talk about how do we solve all that if you're an avoider?
Yeah, so you're getting in your own way. Things that should be fairly simple, maybe blown up in your head as being
Overthinking it.
bigger than it is, or you just don't want to get around to it. So a lot of times you'll get the advice, go big or go home. Just doggone it, think big, do big, audacious, do it. And what that actually does is it makes the avoider feel even more avoidant because they can't even envision getting there. Because it's so big and it explodes. Forget the go big or go home. And the real thing you want to ask yourself is, what's the first step? What is the step that I'm willing to do? And you string together your successes that get you to your goal. Now you can say, this is my goal. I want to have this much month end sales or whatever, however you want to articulate it. But if you only focus on that and and that big audacious goal that you want to achieve, the avoider will get in your way as far as getting started.
And there's another thing I like to track myself on quarterly sales, right? So you go, oh, I've got a big goal this quarter. And you're like, and I got to do this and I got to do that. I'm going to have new strategy, this big strategy, this process. And then at some point I go, yeah, but it all begins with the first sale, the first follow up, the first meeting.
The first
And,
step. Yeah.
and it's really easy to get excited. And then to your point, focus on the big. And the more you focus on the big, the more the procrastination kicks in.
Yeah, because it becomes an anxiety now it's an anxiety-driven thing. You're no longer engaged at the level of finding this to be an interesting or pleasant thing to do. You're all anxious because maybe you won't reach that goal or there's some sort of negative buzz around that. Can I make it or can I not? And then you start creating scenarios in your head that make you doubt yourself and then therefore procrastinate.
Yep. And if you have any sort of anxiety going on in your life at all, it just makes it even worse. So the first one we talked about was avoider. And again, that's one of mine. So I can relate to that one. The second one, I don't know that this is one of mine. I don't think it's one of my top ones, but I can relate to it. And it is restless. How does restless prevent us from making the sales we should make?
It's individuals easily distracted. Certain things require some focused attention, and it is a propensity to be distracted, to want things to move faster than they really are. There's a tendency to multitask, so you're not giving full attention to any one thing. So you might be making mistakes. And actually, you will also find out science shows that it takes twice as long to do things when you're multitasking than if you do several things sequentially. You might find yourself becoming very impatient and waiting for something a little bit more exciting. So it's hard to do those little things because you're not fully present. And there's a high energy associated with this. So it's the strength, of course, is this high energy, but oftentimes the energy is scattered. And so you might end up laying a lot of little digging a lot of little holes, but not actually digging anything deep enough for it to come to fruition.
I don't know that I don't remember this being one of my saboteurs. It's been a couple years since I did the saboteur test with you, but I can relate to the more excited I am to get to my office and get started because I have all these ideas in the head. The more excited I am about what I'm doing that day, the harder it is for me to sit down and do the tasks by step by step. It's just I'll look and I'll go, okay, at 8:30 I'm supposed to do this, but oh my God, what about this? And it becomes almost infinite. And then I'll notice that I'm skipping things because I'm too excited. And and it feels I'm ready to take on the world, but by lunch you're like, I didn't get much done. I didn't get done what I said I was going to get done.
That's right, and it's different from the procrastinator and this procrastinator avoider, because that individual is just looking at these things and they're avoiding it because it seems like it's just too much, or they don't know how to take the first step, whereas the restless person is coming in with high energy and is just digging a bunch of little holes, but never really taking the time to go deep. And so it might be generating a ton of leads, but not ever really following through on any of them because there's something more exciting about this new thing. So there's a thing about needing energy and excitement to make things go. And unfortunately, it can get in your way because not everything is going to be exciting.
I think half the planet is restless now because of screens.
I think so. I think so. I think it's a good insight. There is a lot of restlessness around.
Yeah, and so these are high energy people. They find themselves task switching or what we used to call multitasking, not a good thing. They're impatient. They are focused on the next thing and they're not present. They're shifting focus. They're anything but mindful. They are pumped to get stuff done, but they aren't going to get anything done. What do they need? What would be some of the strategies you would recommend that they use to get them out of this?
There are 3. Now, the biggest one that would be most helpful from the broad perspective is to start working on mindfulness, because mindfulness is all
I
about
knew
what's
you'd
happening
say
in.
that.
I know, and everybody says, "Are you do you just throw
Uh,
mindfulness at everything?" No, but it is a mindfulness is a muscle that has to be developed. It's not something that you can say, "Right now, I'm gonna be mindful." It is a muscle to be strengthened, and so if a person engages in some mindfulness, mental muscle building, basically, you have to go to like you go to the gym to lift weights, you've gotta go and do some exercises to create your ability to focus and to know when your mind is wandering. So if you're working on something and you realize your mind is open is wandering from that important thing, that you can bring yourself back. But that's a learned you have to condition yourself to do that, but it's the most powerful. So that's the first one. The second one is you can just simply clear the distractions off your desk. It's a lot harder to ignore the things that are trying to get you to pivot to it if it's right in front of you, but if it's out of your visuals, and that might include closing some tabs on your computer. It could be as simple as closing tabs on your computer so that your distractions have been minimized so that you can focus on the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you've got to do. And I see people almost restless people, I almost always will see like 25 tabs going on across their screen. So closing off some unnecessary tabs is another way to
and
really,
shut off your phone until you get something done.
or put it in another room or whatever. But anyway, getting rid of the physical distractions or the distractions on your computer is another way to do it. And the third is to have a timer to say for 15 minutes, I'm going to work on this, only this, and
Yes.
build your capacity to work for longer periods of time, fully present on one thing. So there's many ways to deal with the restless, but the restless often does stand in our way of fully completing a task or being fully present and missing maybe even missing important details.
Yeah, I do these. I've been doing on my phone, I do these breathing exercises. This is like 4 minutes, right? Just breathe in, breathe out. And it's just on my Whoop. And there's all sorts of apps you can do that on. But I sometimes when I find myself almost overexcited, like too many things on my mind. I'll just go, okay, do this. And you are forcing your brain to focus on breathing in and breathing out, breathing out in a particular way. And it helps. And then when I go to the gym, before I get out of my car, I do that just one time. And then I try and do it before I go to bed once. And I I know it works. It also making my lungs healthier.
It's nice to develop some habits around at least being able to be fully present. The thing is with restless is that you're not gonna actually know 'cause it's saboteurs are sneaky. You the word sabotage means you're destroying something or getting in the way of something, but you're not doing it overtly. It's a covert kind of thing, so it sort of sneaks in on you. That's the word saboteur is used very specifically to pick up on that characteristic, so you're not gonna know this. You're gonna be thinking to yourself, "Hey, I'm just a high energy. This is exciting. No, this is boring. I don't wanna do this. This is boring, blah, blah, blah," like that. And you're not gonna really realize that this is actually something that's getting in your way because it's sneaky.
Yeah, it's funny, I can say this of myself. Did you ever have that interview where somebody says, "Tell me your strengths and well, tell me your weakness." And I always will say, "I'm very good at like s- um, ideation. I'm very good at strategy and that and vision." And almost by definition, people like that aren't really interested in details. But as soon as that is something that is a weakness, it's not as much of a weakness. And again, those are all positive things saying I have a vision for the future and I can be strategic and I am good at ideation. Yeah, the weakness is that I don't want to follow up on details. At least you have a sense for I have strengths and the weaknesses might be a negative, but most of those things I described are positive. People who are really good at details might say, I'm exceptional at details and detail oriented. I'm meticulous, but no, I don't have that desire to look into the future. I don't think strategically. I don't think about vision. That's not to say it's a bad thing. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses, but your point is these are sneaky because what's associated with you being strategic might also have some downside.
With every strength, you're gonna have a corresponding blind spot. Those are things that you can always work on. It's not an excuse to say, "I'm just not wired to be good at this." You can't say that, but it's really important to take a honest appraisal of yourself, that this is my strengths, these are some things
Right.
that tend to get in my way. And this is another piece of it. The whole idea of the saboteur is the idea of taking just a reasonable look at yourself and saying, this is part of it. This is part of some of the things I need to work on. Not so that you're not perfect, no one is, but the self awareness can get you a long way towards mitigating the impact of these weaknesses.
And this is a little out of left field, but I know you'll be able to handle it. I know you've worked with logistics companies on a lot of different stuff. And I remember you saying to me years ago that you like to team openers and closers together. And please elaborate on that because I think it's a really great idea and it applies to what we're talking about.
A little bit, yeah. When you are looking at sales, there is actually 3 pieces to it, which is the leads, it's the guys who then will close the accounts, and then there's people who will manage existing accounts, or those steps anyway. And individuals tend to be really good at certain pieces of it. Minimally, we can say they enjoy pieces of it more than they enjoy other pieces of it. And if you can put 2 people together who enjoy different stages of that process, you can really develop a powerful team. If I love lead gen, if I love it, and I work with but I can't stand closing the deals. If I pair with somebody who is good at that, a lot of times we can just get more success by working together by accounting for each other's weaknesses.
Yeah, and you said the tendency is people are really good at opening, and the openers tend not to even care about the follow-up. And the closers might not be as very good at the opening of the deal, but they are absolutely driven to close those deals. And I know our personality type is very much openers, but do we want to follow up? No, we have to force ourselves to follow up because there's no energy or fun in following up.
For us, exactly. And here's the thing too, when we talk about things like strengths and blind spots, it's a detached appraisal. So there's a tendency if you have a blind spot, we use the term blind spot deliberately, there's a tendency to maybe be defensive about it. And because maybe you've heard it a million times, oh, you're terrible with details, or you're always late, or whatever. And so we get defensive about these things. So if you can put it all out on the table and know all the moving pieces of how you operate in a way that's detached, you can make a lot of progress on those areas that you previously felt like you had to be defensive about.
Right. And what I've loved about working with you is it's never just the negative. It's, hey, these are your strengths over here, and they come with these negative things. And it's a lot easier to say these are my blind spots if you are actively working on them and you have strategies for getting around them.
And to your early I was gonna say, and to your earlier point, one of the strategies might be to pair with somebody who's really good at something that that you have a bit of a blind spot around. Pairing with somebody and saying, "Hey, you know what? We're a great team together because you do this and I do that, and we can bring it all together," is a great way of accounting for a blind spot, is get some help with it.
Yep. Yep. So the next saboteur I want to talk about is the hyperachiever, which doesn't seem at all bad.
No, the word achieve is a great word. And in fact, the strength of the achiever, of course, is this high standard and that they achieve a lot. The downside or the blind spot around it is that individual can sometimes become defined by their achievements. And so they can have a workaholic tendency. They can have a tendency to look down on individuals who have achieved less sometimes. And sometimes they're so focused on that end goal that they forget the process that gets you there. And a lot of the process that gets you there is can be very much people oriented, and it can involve a lot of listening rather than, all right, this is we're ready. You need to do this because we're ready to close this sale, and you've got some quota in your mind or whatever. If you don't achieve that, there's something wrong with you and all of that. And that can have a whole host of downsides to it. You can be the hard sell kind of person. You can be an individual who is difficult to be around because nobody can keep up with you. There's people around you that could be very helpful to you, but if they see themselves as only a pawn for your goal, then you can start to erode supportive relationships as well. So there's many downsides. And the problem is too, is that the person who's the hyperachiever is really hard on themselves as well. They define themselves by their achievement, but they really have a hard time just relaxing, just being present with their families, for instance. And in fact, I mentioned this to you in our conversation before we went on record. It can even make you make bad decisions or not perform well. So the analogy I used is the sports analogy, and we talked about the Lions and how
When they lost to San Francisco.
yeah, they were ahead by 2 touchdowns, and when they shifted over to, I'm thinking in my head, outcome, "We're gonna win this, we're gonna be in the Super Bowl.
We're up two touchdowns.
Yeah, we're gonna do this, here we go, now let's just take it home." They stopped thinking about their steps, and they started making some
They
mistakes.
stopped thinking about being successful in the next play and the next play after that, and they started focusing on only two more quarters and we're going to the Super Bowl.
End goal, and in fact, my daughter's a sports psychologist, and so when I was saying, "Why are the Lions melting down?" And she said, "In my view, what I can see is that they're starting to become only focused on the goal and not on the process."
Yeah, and all the best football coaches say the process. So we always hear Nick Saban talk about that and Urban Meyer, where they say just focus on the process. And they, by the way, they're that way in practice. So their practices are just this drill. That's all you have to do. You don't have to win the national championship. You have to win this drill in the next 10 seconds and then win the next drill.
Yes. So if you can detach yourself a little bit from that goal, you always have to have goals. So I'm not saying no, you don't have goals, but if you are not focusing on the process and enjoying the steps along the way, you carry a heavy weight on your shoulders throughout the whole thing. Yeah, so you're basically going through your work day with a big heavy sack on your shoulders versus that sack out there is what I want ultimately, and I'm not gonna carry it till I get there.
Right. And if you're also, I'm going to assume I know a little bit about this personality is this, if you have this hyperachiever, there's enough, you're never going to have enough. So winning this week and winning next week and maybe even making a fortune, it's not enough. So you go home and it's just, I want more. I want more. I want more. And you would have been delirious to have this 10 years ago. And now you have it and you're not happy with it.
It's a perpetual moving target to be sure, and at the end of the day, you there's a it's a never-ending treadmill that you put yourself on, and it becomes not that enjoyable after a while, potentially.
And I can see how this hurts our sales. And I know this is hyperachiever and not controller, but I told you while we were prepping that not so long ago, I was on a sales call. Someone was the sales guy. They were trying to sell me something. And I felt like they got to a point where they're like, okay, this is the solution for you, Joe. It fits. You've told me the problem. I told you the solution. I told you how it is. And it felt like they were too much of a hard sell. And I remember my feeling was like, hey, back up. I could feel myself pulling away from that. The more they pushed, uh, I was pushing away from them. Like, oh, okay. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I'm going to talk to that guy again. It wasn't horrible. It was just noticeable enough that this guy was really pushing. And I thought, that doesn't work because nobody likes that hard sell. And in the hard sell used to work in we use the used car lot mentality. It works there because they know you're going to buy a car in the next 24 hours. That is their math. So they know if Ann walks away, she's buying a car somewhere else. So I have to do the hard sell. When you're selling services like we all sell, or software, whatever, it's a few meetings. So they're not going to come to the next meeting. The used car guy, the old way of doing it, he didn't care if because you were done. It was either we either close it now or we don't, and I don't worry about it. And that's not the nature of how we sell today.
And the other thing is too, is that these things boil down to trust and relationships. And so trust and relationships, you don't want to set off somebody else's saboteur. So I just in your example of somebody coming at you and why aren't you taking the deal? And this is what you want. This is what you want. And what you were not coming closer to that guy, or you weren't leaning in, you were leaning back and out and hoping you never heard from him again because he set off something in you that you were like, "No, I don't even." And maybe the pleaser in you didn't wanna say, "Look, buddy, you're coming on a little too strong."
And again, I think that not a bad guy. I'm not, that's always the thing. These are people who are generally very successful for a reason. And
Oh,
again, it's maybe just,
absolutely.
it's when you turned it to 10 from 9 that it got a little
Well,
crazy.
and that's what is meant by a saboteur. It's just these little things that you don't realize are actually having a negative effect on what your ultimate goal is. And if your ultimate goal, of course, is to maximize your sales and maximize that your bottom line or whatever, if that's your goal, and it's a good goal to have, you have to be aware of the things that can get in your way without you even knowing it.
And I'm gonna summarize what we talked about, and then I want to get your final thoughts on this. So I'm talking to my friend Ann Holm. Ann is also my coach. So we're talking about stop sabotaging your sales. And among other things, Ann uses this saboteur framework from Positive Intelligence. And again, this is all backed by science. So if you work with Ann, you take a test and she says, here's your saboteurs, and you go over them. And this is not subjective. This is all proven out. So this is based in science, which is what I like about it. So we talked about saboteurs in general, but we also got into deep dive about the avoiders. And they downplay tasks, they procrastinate, and they have to overcome this by doing one small step, one little thing, focus on it. Then we talked about the restless, the easily distracted, which I feel like most of us are that way now. We're high energy, but we're multitasking. We're impatient. We're losing focus. We're shifting focus from thing to thing. We're not mindful. We have cluttered desks, and we aren't present. We're scattered. And the way we need to become less scattered and less restless is maybe some deep breathing, maybe some mindfulness exercises, clear your desk, close your tabs, and focus. Then we talked about the hyperachiever. They have very high standards and they want to meet those standards. They are constantly looking at that outcome and that achievement. That's why they are successful. But they sometimes focus too much on the outcome and they become the hard sell guy. They forget the humanity in the deal and they look at people as pawns. Sometimes that can happen. And again, these are generally very successful people. Then we didn't get into the details, but there are 6 other saboteurs. One's the victim. I think we all know what that person is. There's the pleaser. That is one of mine where I don't want to say no. Saying yes to too much is the same as not doing your job, I've learned. There's the hyper rational. I think we all live with that. The controller. The person is overly controlling. Not good in a sales context or in any context. And then the stickler, the guy or the gal who just says, this is the way things are done. Everybody should follow these rules. If you're a salesperson and you're treating somebody, your sales prospect, in that way, they are going to be turned off. Potentially, they're exactly like you and maybe they love it. But more likely, they're going to be one of the others who are going to say, that gal is crazy. And last but not least, we talked about the hypervigilant. People are always looking for the next thing that can go wrong. They are worried about all the potential horrible outcomes that are out there in the world. Enough of my blather, and put a big old bow on this one.
Yeah, it's a great topic, and I have found that my clients in the logistics industry really have benefited from learning about themselves in this way because it's a quickly accessible framework to understand what they're doing and how they might be getting in their own way. It's super helpful to understand it. It's super helpful to understand right out of the gate why you do those things, what's that associated strength and what are you overplaying that is getting in your way. And then it's really helpful to understand some steps that you can take right away to get better at it. The nature of saboteurs is that we'll always have them. There's no perfect person in the world, and we'll always have certain, I would say, predictable patterns of how we get in our own way. And if you can identify them and uh, learn to work with them and learn to see them and catch them red-handed getting in your way, you stand a greater chance of mitigating their impact. So it's an ongoing process, but it's at least when you go through the process of understanding who these characters are, uh, you can really make a difference in changing their impact on your
Yep.
sales and other
And then the
things.
nature of this is you're not going to catch it in yourself. You might have listened to this and said, oh, yeah, I'm too much of a pleaser. I'm a avoider. I'm a restless. But that's not necessarily the strategy that's going to get you around this. And we've all taken the Myers-Briggs stuff. I took it, I think, in elementary school and then in middle school, then at high school, then at college, then a master's program. And then I took it with you. The only time it made any impact in my life was when I did it with you because we were going over it on a regular basis, getting an assessment that says, here, this is you, and here's your strengths, here's your weakness. It's not enough. We didn't develop those habits, those behaviors overnight. We're not going to solve them overnight. That's why you need to have a coach, somebody who's going to say, yeah, this is who you are, and here's how we're going to get around it. And let's just assume for a moment that I am listening to this podcast and I have a sales team. There's 10 of us, and we listen to Joe's podcast religiously. We absolutely love it, especially when Ann's on, and we want to work with Ann. What does that look like? Walk me through a process at a high level.
Okay. So if this kind of topic is interesting to you, or you're looking to have just better team cohesion, or you want to do something for yourself individually, the first step is to set up a free consultation. So I will, you get on my calendar. So I have a link on my website, annholm.net, and you can book yourself a free consultation to explore what your options are. And so we'll talk about what are your needs, what are you trying to accomplish, and whether or not I'm a good fit for you, because there's lots of different kinds of professionals who can help you increase your career success. And so we want to find out, are you looking to find out how you actually tick and how you can leverage your strengths and how you can get out of your own way, or are you looking for something else? So the consultation is the best step that you can take. Sort that out. What is it that you really need? And if you need what I've got, then we can set some stuff up, set up a program, however you want to do it. It's fairly, it's not just like the one thing. There's different options of how we can go about addressing what you need. And if you need something else, I'll tell you.
Yep. And what I do like again about what you do, Ann, is there is science behind it. And again, this is nothing against the guys who said, hey, I already built a trucking company, or I already built a freight brokerage, or I grew and successfully exited a software as a service business. They can tell you the war stories. They can tell you the things they did. And that's very valuable. It's not the same as what you're doing. You're coming at it and saying, I can help you understand who you are better, which has been very helpful to me.
Yeah, it is. It's super important. I think one of the things I chuckle about is the people who write books on how to get organized are already organized themselves. And
Right.
so usually if you give a person a book on how to get organized who is essentially struggling with getting organized, usually they get crestfallen. Oh, I'll never be organized because this guy is so organized. So you really have to know how to play your own instrument. You approach the piano differently than you would approach the violin. You have to learn how to play how you are made up. And one of the things I can guarantee to anybody I work with is that I can help you understand how you truly think and help you make
You
the
have
most
been
of it.
listening to the
Yeah, it's been
Logistics
very
of
helpful to me.
Logistics
And again, I
podcast,
think
where we engage with
so
leaders in
often,
the logistics and
always
supply
when
chain
you're
community.
floundering a little
If you
bit,
like what you hear,
oh my
please
God, I'm not
subscribe,
doing
hit
this
the
right, I'm not
like
doing
button,
that.
and
And
leave us a nice
you
review on
can't
Apple or
see
Spotify
yourself
or wherever else you
objectively.
listen. Also,
It's just-
please check
and
out our videos.
I don't even know
on
that your
YouTube
friends and family can
connect
see
with us on
objectively. That's why you
LinkedIn. We're
need
very
somebody
big on
who can
LinkedIn.
look at this
And you can
in an
also reach
analytical
us
way
on
and do
the
the coaching.
Logistics of Logistics
Anyway,
our
and
website.
it's always a pleasure to have you on my podcast. What I'll do is I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website. Any of the links you give me, I'll put those in the show notes.
Okay, I'll do that. That'll be
And thank you so much.
all righty. Good to see you.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support is very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward.